The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory, business owners in downtown Christiansted share how ongoing road issues and repeated sewage overflows are once again driving away customers as the holiday season nears. Plus, lingering questions remain from the general election, including the reasons behind delays in election night results on St. Thomas and voter concerns on St. Croix over the absence of ballot boxes. We'll have the details. And later, we'll examine how a Donald Trump White House could impact recently re-elected delegate to Congress, Stacey Plaskett, and her agenda for the territory. Stay tuned as this week's panel joins the conversation to break down these issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Marcelina Ventura Douglas. A year ago this month, we highlighted concerns from downtown Christiansted business owners about the major disruptions caused by the Christiansted sewer replacement project, which involved extensive digging and left roads unpaved for long periods. Now, as the holiday season approaches once again, some roads have been repaired, but repeated sewage overflows continue to add to their frustration as work carries on. Here's more. This was a situation recently next to Nate's Boathouse in downtown Christiansted. Sewage water bubbling up from a manhole, pooling into a large puddle in the street, and then flowing into the boardwalk and into the Christiansted harbor, as diners nearby struggled with the stench. At the same time, sewage overflowed from a manhole into the sea near the entrance to the seaplane terminal. Waste management officials said the latest sewage issue in the downtown area was caused by a broken 20-inch force main line, which required the LBJ pump station to go offline to make the repairs.
When the station goes down, then the water has to find an exit. So the water is going to overflow through that manhole. That's the way for the water to get out. So under the bad circumstances, it's best for the water to actually leave the system through that manhole than to actually back up in residential home or businesses in Christiansted.
The issue was contained within a few days, but this is not a new problem. Last month, a malfunctioning pump at the LBJ pump station caused raw sewage to flow from the same low-lying manholes in Christiansted. For downtown businesses, the sewage problem is just one of many challenges. With the holiday shopping season approaching, store owners in Christiansted are also concerned about the impact of the Christiansted sewer replacement project. The condition of these roads continues to hinder foot traffic and sales, making an already tough season even harder. I'm joined now by Matthew Ridgway, president of the Christiansted Retail and Restaurant Association and owner of Caribbean Sea Adventures, along with Jimmy Marchiona, front of the house supervisor at Nate's Boathouse. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Good day.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Marchiona, I'll start with you. As Nate's Boathouse is in what waste management officials have called the lowest area in Christiansted, where wastewater overflows whenever there's an issue. Could you tell us about what's been happening there recently and how it's impacting your customers?
Well, whenever there's a heavy rain, we will have flooding in that general area of King Cross Street. The manhole covers will be actually blown off so that it's a danger to drive in there. There'll be a general odor that is really unacceptable to eat in for sure, but even walking by it is just kind of unpleasant. Essentially, anytime there's gray water that's coming out of those, we will have an odor. Our bathrooms will back up and be unusable because there's no place for the water to flow. And we generally will not do any business during those periods. Now, that period could be anywhere from a couple hours, or in the case in mid-October, it was about 4 days, including the weekend.
Well, you know, Mr. Ridgway, you mentioned to our producer that a newly installed sewer line from the Christiansted sewer replacement project became disconnected back in March, leading to sewage spilling out since then. How has this issue been impacting your business?
So again, thank you for having me. The period of time between March and now, my business is down 30%. In that same period, air arrivals, according to the Bureau of Economic Research, is up 22%. So how I'm able to reconcile the loss of business any other way than this very specific problem is challenging. Caribbean Sea Adventures is number one of 41 tours and activities in Christiansted. But if I can't get somebody to even walk near my business, I can't sell them a tour. El Leon has already gone out of business. They're right next to us. We're next if this isn't fixed.
Mr. Marciona, what kind of health and safety concerns have these conditions raised for you and your team?
Well, obviously, anytime you have gray water in an area, you have an odor. That odor affects people's mood. That affects how they act, how they work. We've had a number of employees who have been had to leave during the period in October when the stench was so bad that really we were unable to operate. Even though our business was open, we did literally no business, with the exception of our regular bar business for about 4-day period.
I want to ask you both, Mr. Ridgway, you can answer first. How have you had to make any adjustments, with your business, with life because of these issues?
Yes. Right now, Caribbean Sea Adventures is depleting all of my personal assets to keep the business alive. So when Marshall and Sterling calls and says they need $10,000 for our health insurance payment, but we haven't made it in the month, that's a problem. So I can't just call them up and say, oh, I'm sorry, Waste Management broke a pipe in front of my business and now I have no customers. That's not an acceptable answer to them. So we're doing everything we can to survive until this issue is cured, but there is a limit to where we can go with this. And Waste Management, they don't have an excuse for this being the way that it is. All that happened is 2 pipes became disconnected. They just need to be pushed back together. Put a clamp on it and it's done. We're talking about this would take 20 minutes to an hour to repair, but this has been going on for over 200 days. I'm out hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this isn't okay. The government has failed us, and I'm understandably angry, but I'm also very disappointed.
Mr. Marciona, speak to me about some of the adjustments that you guys have had to make over at Nate's Boathouse.
We've had to reduce our staff. This is naturally the slowest period as we get through October and begin into the beginning of the holiday season, where we start to see our local clientele increase, as well as people starting to come down from the States. So we've reduced our staffing. We've eliminated the music that we had a couple days a week. We were doing music on Thursday or Friday with Eric Cope. We normally do music on Sundays. We've eliminated those. We hope to be bringing them back, but we need to see our increase in numbers. And right now we really do need the local clientele, which we last year lost. During that time period when they had carved up the roads and literally no one was coming into town. When you lose somebody like that, you lose the repetition. People are creatures of habits. If they get into a habit, we routinely had people coming 3 or 4 times a month as groups. Those are all gone. We hope to get them back here as we start to get into the holiday season. Yeah.
Mr. Ridgway, as president of the Christiansted Retail and Restaurant Association, what are you hearing from other downtown business owners? You both are sharing some of your struggles. What are other impacts, are you hearing from them on these ongoing issues, both for the sewage overflow and also for the road conditions?
So in speaking with other business owners, and I'm also a partner in St. Croix Surf Company and Southern Saint, and I was a partner in Ginger Thomas. We had to close Ginger Thomas this year because we just didn't have enough foot traffic. My other businesses, we were on life support. If this isn't cured and cured very quickly, many businesses in Christiansted will go under. It won't matter if you pave the streets in gold. We won't be there to take advantage of it. So the government, they can't be an entity that prevents us from pursuing what's best for us. I can't tell you how disappointed it is because I'm more of a live and let live type of guy. But we have a social contract with the government, and they have committed to providing what's in everybody's best interest. But at no point in time is the streets running with sewage or the boardwalk running with sewage in anybody's best interest. So they've failed us in a very dramatic way. And I don't know that we're going to be here if they don't fix this very, very soon.
You know, you guys are getting ready to put on the annual post-Thanksgiving jump up event, and that's right around the corner. Do you think these conditions, are going to impact the overall turnout?
Absolutely. So people have not been patronizing Christiansted because of the roads last year, the sewage now. It's for some people, it's been years since they've come to see us. I don't know what to expect out of this jump up. I know that we're going to put our best foot forward, and we're very excited about our renewed partnership with the Department of Tourism to make sure that this is the best jump up from our perspective as it's ever been. So I would really encourage people to come out, come see us again. We love you. We miss you. And I believe that Waste Management will do everything in their power to make sure that they're not a hindrance to this wonderful event.
Mr. Marchiona, is there anything specific you'd like to see from local government officials to help resolve these problems?
Well, it's difficult. We know that the water issue is based on the volume that's coming down at a certain time. Obviously, the pumping situation that happened in mid-October was unacceptable. That was black water, that was raw sewage going into the ocean, going into people who are living out in the harbor there. That was unacceptable. So what I would really like to see is when that happens, they need to choose some kind of a boom system that will at least filter out what's coming down there from the gray water. They probably need to create some kind of an area, a low area where they can get that water to settle, as opposed to just going straight into the harbor there.
Mr. Ridgway, I want to ask you, before we go, have you or any other business owners discussed any collective actions that you might be thinking of taking as these issues continue?
Absolutely. So to put things in perspective, if one of my boats at Caribbean Sea Adventures was to discharge raw sewage, that's a $10,000 fine per occurrence. So the government's been doing it every day for over 200 days. We feel that litigation is our only option at this point, and Caribbean Sea Adventures is pursuing litigation against Waste Management for this. We not only need them to cure the issue, but we're going to seek damages.
Mr. Marchiona, I want to ask you, is there anything you'd like the community to know about supporting downtown Christiansted businesses during this time, especially with these ongoing hurdles?
Yeah, it's the holiday season, folks, and we really like to see you down in the boardwalk. It's a beautiful place. We have a number of events that are going to be coming up for the holidays, and we really like to see the local clientele come down and you see those local businesses, shop locally, come down. Really, just to see more people coming down from the local area would be just an absolute, just a blessing to us down there on the boardwalk.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming and for being so candid and sharing some of the issues. And we do hope to have some of these issues resolved. Coming up, we'll hear from this week's panel. But first, let's take a look at the issues that are up for discussion. With the results now certified, questions remain about the issues that arose during the November 5th general election, the first managed by the Supervisor's Office rather than the Board of Elections. Prior to Election Day, Supervisor Carolyn Fox assured the public that her office would provide a transparent and efficient process, promising timely results.
We look forward to our timely process. Again, our goal has been between 8 and 8:30 to kind of get the results.
But on election night in St. Thomas, delays occurred. While after 9 p.m., ballots from the Charlotte Amalie High School voting center were still in transit to the election office, which is less than a half a mile away. The delay resulted in unofficial results for the St. Thomas-St. John district be released after 10 p.m., postponing the overall territorial tallies. On St. Croix, the election office met its target, releasing unofficial district results around 8:15 p.m. Officials, however, encountered a separate issue earlier that day when some voters raised concerns about the lack of ballot boxes.
I, got my paper ballot, filled it out, and then turned around to look for the ballot box. I saw none. Called the worker and asked, well, where's the ballot box? And she said, well, you have to go to the scanner. And I said, no. And I, at that time, quoted Title 18, Chapter 19, Section 517. They had no answer to that.
A subsequent exchange between Moorhead and officials at the Claudio Marco voting center ended with Moorhead handcuffed and removed from the premises.
She was detained and removed from the premises because she refused to comply with the orders made by the Board of Election, and she refused my lawful order to leave on her own.
Moorhead, who eventually voted at St. Dunstan's Episcopal School, was not the only voter who questioned the lack of ballot boxes at voting centers.
We asked him for the ballot box and there is no ballot box present. That means Carolyn Fox is violating VI Code Title 18, Chapter 19, Subsection 5, Section 517. She's in violation.
Fox explained that the requirement for ballot boxes dates back to a 1963 law, which she said has been outdated since the introduction of electronic voting machines in 1986.
From 1986, the boxes in the voting centers has been put away with. The present system that we have, the DS200 tabulating machine, do have a box in it, a blue ballot box, and it's a box. All votes are cast and tabulated in the voting machine.
Fox also highlighted the need for the legislature to amend the 1963 law and said she identified several election laws in need of updates when she became supervisor of elections in 2013. Meanwhile, Cleopatra Peter, who was elected on November 5th to the Board of Elections, said she would continue to advocate for election reforms.
I just want free and fair elections here in the Virgin Islands. That is what I will be advocating for. Free and fair elections for all.
With Donald Trump returning to the White House, Delegate to Congress Stacey Plaskett could face new challenges in advancing her agenda. As a Democrat, Plaskett gained national attention in 2021 when she served as one of the House managers in Trump's second impeachment trial, arguing that Trump should be held accountable for inciting the January 6th Capitol attack.
When the violence erupted as a response to his calls to fight against the stolen election, he did not walk it back. He did not tell them no. He did the opposite. The opposite. He praised and encouraged the violence so that it would continue. He fanned the flame of violence.
Plaskett has also had some memorable moments with Republican lawmakers on the House floor. Last year, a viral clip captured her tense exchange with now House Speaker Mike Johnson during a committee hearing.
Because he's not here. Very
No,
good.
you can
Thank
examine
you.
it. It's a document. He's going to
No,
enter into the
examine
record.
him for what he wrote and the intent behind what he said.
Well, I would
But-
just,
okay.
I would
Go
just
on.
point out that that's unanimous consents are for documents, and we got the document
Mr.
right here
Chairman,
that he handed to you.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous
The
consent.
chair now recognizes Ms.
Mr.
Wasserman
Chairman,
Schultz for her 5
I have
minutes.
a unanimous consent request, Mr. Chairman.
At the Democratic National Convention in August, Plaskett joined Governor Albert Bryan Jr. and a contingent of local Democrats in publicly endorsing Trump's opponent, Kamala Harris.
The Virgin Islanders are strong, resilient, and committed and passionate to vote for the next President of the United States. All 13 votes to Kamala Harris!
Plaskett went viral again in September when a video clip from her MSNBC interview last summer was shared by Tesla CEO Elon Musk. In the 18-second clip, Plaskett is referring to Trump when she says,
And he needs to be stopped.
Plaskett immediately corrected herself, but in his September 17th tweet, Musk stated, quote, "The Dems explicitly call for Trump to be shot, and now 2 people have answered that call." His tweet with Plaskett's remark gained more than 27 million views. Despite the partisan challenges, Plaskett said on election night that she's confident in her ability to work with Republicans to move forward the Virgin Islands agenda.
I've had plenty of instances when I have had very strident debate with my Republican colleagues and then gone out for dinner with them afterwards. We recognize in the House that we are representing the interests of our people, and, that's the way I'm going to continue to operate. And I think at the end of the day, Virgin Islanders want truth, and they want us to stand up for rights. That's another reason that they send us to Washington. My job is not just to represent the interests of the people of the territory, but to be their voice on issues of national importance. I'm looking forward to another 2 years of being the voice of the Virgin Islands and Washington.
Joining me on set to break down these issues is Terrence Thomas, co-host of Ideas on Issues on WSTA 1340 AM. Welcome to Comes with the Territory, Mr. Thomas.
Hi, good evening, and nice to be here.
And from our St. Croix studio, we're also joined by attorney Key Walker, founder and managing attorney of the Walker Legal Group, and Neville James, former senator and host of Analyze This on WTJX FM 93.1. It's great to have you both with us.
Good evening.
Glad to be here.
Before we dive into the election-related topics, I'd like to start by getting your thoughts on our featured discussion. Attorney Walker, one of your offices is in downtown Christiansted, so you're seeing this issue up close. Tell me, what's your take on the situation?
I mean, the businesses in downtown Christiansted, especially the retail businesses, have really struggled the last couple of years with the road situation. There was a time, last year where there were actual trenches in the roads in Christiansted, making it very difficult and frustrating to drive across. So, the roads are finally being repaired. We're happy to see that. But they were left in that state for a very long time. And then now coupled with the sewage issues, it's not clear to me how these businesses are continuing to survive after all this time.
Mr. Thomas, what does it say about government priorities when we're seeing these issues with roads and for sewage and everything repeatedly coming about?
I think first and foremost, I think the government is overwhelmed. There's a large number of capital projects that the government has undertaken. And I think they're overwhelmed, number one. Number two, situations like sewage, not just on St. Croix, but we have developed a similar situation here in St. Thomas. It tells me that we don't have enough manpower to deal with these situations. And perhaps we're not forward-looking in terms of making sure that we're properly equipped. Based on what I've been told, the issues surrounding this situation with sewage has to do with the capability of pump stations to meet the demand of pumps breaking down intermittently, and it seems like we either have to repair the pump or get pumps from off island. So I think it's a situation where we're in, so to speak, over our head.
Yeah. Mr. James, what do you think Christiansted retailers should be doing next to push for solutions to some of these issues?
Well, I think we've gotten to the point now where they were just expecting results. When the Waste Management announced in November of 2021 that they had been negotiating with FEMA for 3 years to address the island's water sewer issues. The figure that we were told back then was between 1.5 billion and 2 billion. When they finally settled on an actual figure in July of this year, that number was reduced down to $989 million. So there's a lot of things going on here, a lot of moving parts. But at this particular point, they just want results, and understandably so. I spoke with the governor, by the way, on October 5th, and I told him about the situation. We spoke about the situation down there in St. Croix, down by the Holga Dams, which is on the bottom of King Cross Street. And he agreed that it was something that was of high priority, but he also said, now we get to fix it. So he has, 2 years, about a month and a half on top of that left in his term. So hopefully we can see some positive results. But it's not going to be a 2-year issue, though. This is a planning issue. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to 2 former senators, Basil Otley and Myron Jackson, because I myself as a senator didn't understand the gravity with respect to why planning is so important for our jurisdiction. And this is a classic example of that.
Yeah. Well, I want to turn now to the recent general election and the delays at the Charlotte Amalie High School voting center that pushed back the release of the unofficial results for the St. Thomas St. John district on election night. Supervisor Carolyn Fox said she conducted an investigation into the incident, and this is what she found.
The workers, including the judge, indicated that they were overwhelmed. A few of the poor workers didn't show up, and they didn't let the office or the deputy know. And there are particular procedures that they should follow on election night. So that's something that we will have to address and correct going forward. Our goal was to make sure we get timely, accurate information. So we did not want to report what we didn't have. And so we will make the corrective actions in the future. And we apologize for the untimely results.
Mr. Thomas, hearing that poll workers failed to notify the election system of, not being present, what does this say to you about the management, with the elections office and how the election was conducted?
I think they need to have some check boxes that the polls open at 7 a.m., right? So you'd figure by midday, 1 p.m. in the afternoon, they can do an assessment as to where they are with number of people coming in to vote and the personnel they have on hand to help manage a polling place with proper procedures in place. And, unless you could check off, that should trigger you making a call to whomever needs to be notified to let them know, listen, I foresee a problem and we need to address it before the polls close at 7 p.m.
Yeah. Mr. James, what should election officials do to restore public confidence after these delays that we saw?
I agree with Mr. Thomas. If the polls open at 7 and we have 12 hours, a 12-hour voting window, there should be contingency plans in place to address the shortfall. Obviously, 2024 was a turnout problem election year. On the mainland, we had less turnout than expected. Now in the Virgin Islands, we had less poll worker turnout than expected. I was not laughing at that, but when you think about it, to know that the proximity from that particular precinct or polling center to the elections office and using the argument or the excuse that they were overwhelmed and they didn't know that they were going to be short on workers, I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. We only get to vote ever so often, Ms. Ventura Douglas. And this is a classic example of where preparation is not where it should have been. I feel bad for the voters in St. Thomas. I feel bad for, the media like ourselves, because we want to give complete, comprehensive results. Totally unfortunate. But I look at it from the standpoint that on the St. Croix side, at least we delivered the goods.
Attorney Walker, two candidates on the St. Croix ballot, Mary Moorhead and Cleopatra Peter, both raised concerns about the lack of ballot boxes at voting centers and accused the elections office of violating the law. Yet both were elected using the very same system that they had an issue with. How do you think this impacts the credibility of their concerns?
I mean, ultimately, I don't think it really impacts the credibility of their concerns. I heard the position of Ms. Fox that it's an outdated law, and I can definitely understand her position. But to the extent that you still have members of the voting public that have concerns, whether they're valid or not, about using a machine or some sort of electronic voting system, until the law is amended, I do think that we should at least cater to the voters and try to make that means of voting available to them. But as far as affecting their credibility, I don't think it does necessarily. I just think that there is an issue regarding preference and trust when it comes to voting.
Yeah. Now, let's get into the new elections board. Mr. James, with Cleopatra Peter now elected, what challenges will this pose for Supervisor Fox, given that Ms. Peter has been one of her most vocal critics?
I'm confident in Ms. Fox in handling Cleopatra Peter. I mean, when Ms. Fox first came on, I believe somewhere between 2013 and 2014, she was dealing with Adelbert Bryan, and everybody knows Adelbert Bryan has never seen a confrontation that he wouldn't embrace. So I'm confident Ms. Fox can handle, Ms. Peter. I know Ms. Peter has been very outspoken. She's a radio personality, but at the end of the day, I expect Ms. Fox, and Ms. Fox is tenacious in her own way. So don't be surprised, but don't forget, Ms. Fox is in the management business where the board is concerned, where the election system is concerned. Ms. Peter is a board member. She's just one of the board members, the entire board. It's a Virgin Islands board. So it's about, representing the people, wanting the process. She said she wants fair and transparent elections. So we'll see if she sticks to that.
We'll see. There will also be some significant changes to the makeup of the Board of Elections, with 6 members departing. In the St. Thomas-St. John District, 4 board members will be leaving. Arturo Watlington, Alicia Wells, and Lydia Hendricks chose not to seek re-election, while Angeli Leardom was defeated in the primary. On St. Croix, 2 current board members will not be returning, which are Lisa Harris-Moorhead, who chose not to seek re-election, and Epiphane Joseph, who was unsuccessful in the general election. New faces include Cleopatra Peter and C. Jason John Baptiste in the St. Croix district, and Chanel Callwood, Barbara Laurent, and Larry Basholti in the St. Thomas-St. John district. Basholti, who has served on the board in the past, will now join his wife, Atanya Springett, as a fellow board member. Mr. Thomas, what do you think about a husband and wife both serving on the Board of Elections?
I really don't see it as an issue. Both of them ran in accordance with the law that allows them to run for that position, and that's just the luck of the draw. I really don't see it being an issue. Each one of them is an individual on the board, and yes, they're husband and wife, but there are other circumstances that come up around here in the territory where family members sit on different boards and have to make decisions, you know.
Mr. James, what are your thoughts on the significant changes that we're seeing with the board?
Well, change, is constant, and I'm glad in a sense because those who are no longer on the board, they've served for a long time. They've served willingly. They've delivered the goods on their behalf, and they need to be commended for stepping up and offering themselves. Hopefully, those who are, as we say, the Nubians coming on, replacing them, understand the importance of the role. The election system, that inalienable right to vote is sacred. And I just want for them to focus on being an effective board and not necessarily focusing on building their profile and their personality. I, as someone who has been, in the election process, been elected on numerous occasions, all we want are fair and transparent elections, but we also want to educate the public as to how to vote and why it is important to vote and take advantage of this opportunity that only happens ever so often.
Yeah. Now, Election Supervisor Carolyn Fox filed a lawsuit against the Board of Elections in October after the board voted to place Delegates of Congress candidate Ida Smith back on the ballot, following Fox's initial disqualification of her. The lawsuit was recently dismissed, with the court finding that Fox cannot sue in her capacity as election supervisor. The court also ruled that she cannot continue the complaint as a taxpayer, as she cannot demonstrate an impact from Smith being on the ballot. Attorney Walker, what are your thoughts on this series of events related to this complaint?
I mean, I think it was a sad series of events. While Ms. Fox may have had a point to make, and maybe ultimately she would have been right on the merits or correct on the merits, the lawsuit itself was very ill-advised. When you're filing a lawsuit, you're looking at the technicalities and you're looking at the substance of the lawsuit. And it was clear that the technicalities did not support the lawsuit going forward. And I think ultimately it does more damage than good. Not every single battle needs to be fought all the way. Sometimes you have to let things go, maybe wait for another opportunity that presents a better opportunity for you to make your point. But I just think that this is a taint on the election system. And I think it's going to lead to more disputes, because now the obvious question is, who's going to pay for this law firm that the supervisor retained to even file this lawsuit, when the court ultimately held that only the Board of Elections can retain counsel to initiate lawsuits involving, the relationship between the board and the supervisor, or matters concerning the Board of Elections.
Yeah. Mr. James, Judge Yvette Ross Edwards noted in her opinion that the supervisor of elections is not authorized to retain private counsel to represent her in her official capacity without the board's approval. In light of this opinion, do you think this could place Fox's employment in jeopardy?
I would hope not. Miss Fox had a deep rooted conviction with respect to what took place with candidate Ida Smith. I looked at it as a civics lesson. When I read everything associated with what determines eligibility for a federal office, specifically the House of Representatives, I learned, along the way that the residency requirement that Ms. Fox is holding on, has held on to vigorously, really is not as stringent as we thought it was. And I was speaking with Attorney Walker earlier, and I just think it's akin to what took place with Lauren Boebert in Colorado. She was in a particular district. She didn't think she would be successful if she ran in this particular district. There was a retirement. Ken Buck decided he would not seek re-election. So she decided she's going to run out of that district in Colorado. I thought there was a residency requirement. I came to find out that there wasn't. So it was a good civics lesson. I think Ms. Fox, in this instance, overstep a little bit, and ultimately, I think she may bear the cost for the law firm based on how Judge Ross ruled. We'll see how that plays out.
Returning now to Delegate to Congress Stacey Plaskett and the impact of a Trump presidency. Do you think her high-profile stances on the confrontations with the Republicans could limit her ability to the territory's agenda over the next 2 years? Mr. Thomas?
I do have some concern simply because, one, the president-elect, based on his past history, has shown a degree of pettiness and getting even with folks. And there's no running from that. He has demonstrated that throughout his political career. And then the House of Representatives is definitely going Republican, and some of his staunchest supporters are possibly going to hold leadership roles in the House. Add to that, he nominated Matt Gaetz, one of his bosom buddies, so to speak, to be Attorney General. And only God in heaven knows what's going to happen with this motley crew of individuals that he's putting together to be part of his administration. I think Stacey's saving grace is that I want to believe that they're more level-headed and even-tempered individuals in the House of Representatives on the Republican side that she can work with. And that's what I'm looking forward to. But I do expect to see some issues arise between her and the White House. It was demonstrated after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, where the president-elect, who was president at the time, actually went after the mayor of San Juan. So he holds no punches. So it's going to, we're going to have to see how that goes.
Yeah. Mr. James, what could this mean for issues like raising the rum cover over rates?
Well, that's a frustration. That's a frustrating issue, only because when the Democrats had the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives in their favor in 2021 and 2022, we dropped the ball. And now the trifecta, as they like to call it, has flipped. And we have a president-elect who was previously a president in Donald Trump. We have a House, as Mr. Thomas just mentioned, that is confirmed to be in Republican hands. We got the Senate with a 53-47 edge or margin on the Senate side. So, I really don't know, Miss. And I as you know, I've had a history of making staunch arguments on behalf of what I believe are the people's money, also in Puerto Rico. But as it stands right now, we're at 1050. Hopefully, we can work things out and we can get it back to the 1325 that we needed to, because we have a lot of things tied to that. But that one is up in the air, Ms. Ventura Douglas, and hopefully, the stars can align. And just piggybacking on Mr. Thomas, we'll find out about our delegate right now, because she has been a staunch, opponent of the Republicans, and we'll see how it plays out. She'll be a better delegate at the end of 2026. That's for sure.
Well, it definitely is up in the air. Attorney Walker, there's some concern that a Trump presidency might lead to cuts or reversals in federal funding for the territory. Do you think that this is a realistic concern?
I don't think so, because of where we are with the federal funds, especially the ones coming out of Hurricanes Irma and Maria and the COVID funds. And as much, a huge portion of the funds that were allocated have been obligated. So I think that puts us in a good position. And I also, while she's a great delegate, Stacey Plaskett isn't our only voice in D.C. The governor travels to D.C. We have lobbyists in D.C. And during the time that Governor Bryan has been in office as governor, he's made sure to engage lobbyists that are on both sides, both Democrats and both Republicans. So there's relationships in D.C. that we can build upon. And, the delegate may just need to pivot and adjust, and probably work more closely with some of the lobbyists or work more closely with the governor in the best interest of the people of the Virgin Islands. But as far as the federal funding that we currently have being under threat, I don't see that.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback real quickly on that. This is a very tight margin in the House of Representatives right now. Even the Republicans are in control. That is a very, very slim margin we're dealing with. And with controversial appointments and things of that nature, that could create some friction and some decision making. And the next thing you know, Democrats might be in control. You never know.
Well, the next 2 and the next 4 years is definitely going to be interesting. I want to shift now to representation in the legislature, especially for the large Hispanic community on St. Croix. With Senator Samuel Carrion, a key Hispanic vote voted out in the recent election. Mr. James, tell me, what does this mean for Hispanic representation moving forward?
Well, check this out, man. I'm glad you got me on because we in the business of educating the public. My sister, Senator Maurice James, she is half Hispanic. On her mother's side, she's an Espinosa. People come out of Culebra, not Vieques, you know what I'm saying? So there is representation. Having said that, right, there was a time on St. Croix when our makeup, our demographics was about 35-40% Puerto Rican back in the day. Now, things have changed. And we had great senators over the years who are of Puerto Rican lineage. Liliana Belado de O'Neill, who actually had a good election this year. I think she won to be on the Board of Elections and the Constitutional Convention. Hector Cintron, Nelly Rivera O'Reilly, Samuel Sanders, the list goes on. Senator Carrion served us well for 4 years. I think he finished 9th behind Senator Capehart, who finished 8th. The Hispanic population on St. Croix, notwithstanding the fact that the only representation we know of is Ms. James on her maternal side, they'll be taken care of. We're going to look out for them because we've always been that way. We've always been a collective support here, a support system for everybody here in this melting pot that is the Virgin Islands, specifically here on the island of St. Croix.
Attorney Walker, what do you think Senator Carrion's law says about the political influence for the Hispanic community on St. Croix?
I mean, ultimately, some of the people who supported him in the past seems like they didn't support him this time. So, and I would like to think that some of the people who supported him in the past and didn't support him this time are Hispanic. So I think, sometimes you can vote that, in a manner that's outside of race or outside of ethnicity, and you're just voting for who you think is the best, or you're voting for who you think performed well. I don't think it's an actual judgment or some sort of conclusion on the representative capacity of Hispanics. Hispanics are a major part of the fabric of the St. Croix community. My grandmother's generation, I don't know one person from her generation that did not speak fluent Spanish. All of us have cousins that are of Hispanic origin, just like Neville just explained his sister is. I've got plenty of cousins in my family who are Puerto Rican or who have some sort of Puerto Rican parentage. And when I go to vote, I don't vote based on who's Puerto Rican or who's not Puerto Rican. I vote for who's the best. And a lot of times that is a Puerto Rican. So I don't think it says anything about or anything negative about the representation of Hispanics in the community.
Mr. Thomas, on St. Thomas, there is a large Hispanic community as well, too. Is Senator Bolquez that Hispanic representation for those in the St. Thomas, St. John district, or does it need a stronger representation of voice for those in this district?
Interesting you ask that. First of all, he's running at large. So unlike Senator Carrion, who is in a district, Senator Bolquez is voted in territorially. I was looking at some early numbers, and I think where he really crossed the finish line was in the St. Croix district, which I understand is where his father is from originally. I don't know necessarily if there is a demonstrated need, so to speak, for somebody to represent Hispanic people. I know Senator Bolquez is very fluent in Spanish. I'm trying to think while you were talking to the other panelists, which senator we've had like in the last 20, 30 years that is of Hispanic origin or descent here in the St. Thomas St. John district, and I really can't think of one per se. I don't think that quote unquote representation factor is as big a concern or is a concern in general here in this district versus, let's say, St. Croix.
Neville, Mr. James, I want to ask you, can you recall whether or not there was a notable Hispanic representation from the St. Thomas St. John district? You're somewhat of a political historian.
I've been racking my brains, after listening to what Terry had to say. And I honestly, I remember as a kid in the 70s, looking at the representation, the John Maduros, the Elmo Roebucks, the what have you, the Irby Atleys. And I am sitting here just trying to think of someone that we will call, right, and affectionately, right, I want to make sure the public knows this, or I want to preface it, right, we like to refer to them as Papa and Mama, right, and I can recall a Puerto Rican senator from the district of St. Thomas St. John. He's absolutely correct, Terry. Senator Bolkes, his dad, is from the work and rest area here on St. Croix. And like I said earlier, we've had numerous senators from St. Croix. As a matter of fact, the very first time I ran in 2004, there was a concerted effort to elect senators of Puerto Rican descent, because at the time there were no Puerto Rican senators in the legislature for a long time. I believe Leilani Belado de O'Neill had been the last Puerto Rican senator, and she lost in 1996. And then they were also knocking the Turnbull administration for not having Puerto Ricans in key administration leadership positions in the cabinet. So Senator Juan Figueroa Seville and Senator Pedro Encarnacion, who were all part of the same class as freshmen, along with then Senator Terrence Positive Nelson, who is now Positive T.A. Nelson. But I can be honest, and then subsequent to that, Senator Nellie O'Reilly and Senator Samuel Sanes. But I'll be honest with you, Senator Carrie Young, Senator Chucky Hansen came back in. Really hasn't been there. Mrs. Ventura Douglas, for some reason. So, I like to rack my brains. I like my history. But honestly, Terry is right. I can't remember a true Puerto Rican senator from the district of St. Thomas St. John.
Yeah. Before we move on, though, outside of just the Puerto Ricans, there is a large Dominican population, especially in the St. Thomas St. John district. Do you think, I want you to speculate on when you think we're going to see a representative from the Dominican, with the Dominican lineage be elected into public office?
I think in the next decade. I think that person is going to be either first or second generation Virgin Islander whose family came from the Dominican Republic here. They went to school here. They possibly attended the university here, and they have decided to throw their hat into the ring. I was racking my brain like Senator James. And the only other person that I could think of would be former Senator Janet Millen Young. She does have, her mom is from Puerto Rico, so she does have Puerto Rican lineage. But again, I went to school with her, so I never looked at her as being a Puerto Rican. I just knew she spoke Spanish. But that's the closest I can come, other than Senator Donny Storg, as Senator James mentioned in our discussion.
Yeah. But before we wrap up, there's one more issue I'd like us to cover. Governor Albert Bryan Jr. recently faced some probing questions about his personal life during a press briefing. Let's take a look at part of that exchange.
We've received reports that Tourism Commissioner Farrington is essentially acting as First Lady, and maybe receiving taxpayer-funded security, has an office in Government House and other perks. Is any of that accurate? And can you explain why?
I also bought a plane with I bought a jet with the thing. I have a baby in St. Croix, and I mean, what are you asking me? You're asking me about rumors on the street. The First Lady is married to the governor. I mean, you asking me about my personal life. That none of what you were saying is true. She don't have any office here. I mean, what are you, the Inquirer?
Well, I think it's a fair question, given that everyone involved is a government employee traveling on taxpayer-funded trips. I don't think that's unfair.
There's only one trip a year that the government pays for. Even when I was married to Yolanda, is the National Governors Association's winter meeting. Everything else for any official of First Lady of the Virgin Islands is paid for by the governor or the person itself or somebody else. So I just want to make that clear that being the First Lady of the Virgin Islands is not a job anywhere. It is not listed as anything.
Given what you just explained, is your divorce final, and is there currently a First Lady of this territory?
I'm not married to anybody. I don't think that's any of your business, but.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas, I want to ask you, do you think the reporter crossed the line by asking about the governor's personal life, or do you think she was justified given the reporter's point that all government officials are involved?
I think the reporter started out on the right foot by asking about the person in question that has been seen traveling with the governor. Reporters have a duty to probe, right? I think the question about the status of his divorce, that gets a little personal. At the same time, the governor needs to realize he's a public figure, and the world in which we live with social media and all these other things that pick us up in moments that 30, 40 years ago, nobody would ever even know anything about. You have to be aware of that and expect that questions are going to come from the media and elsewhere. He has a social media presence. I'm quite sure people may go into his personal messaging box and ask him certain questions. I would have, if that was me, I wasn't going to ask him about his divorce. I think that's very personal. The fact that he had his divorce proceedings put under seal meant he did not want that out there for the public for understandable reasons. But asking about someone traveling with him who happens to also be a government employee, and it's my understanding she's also in an official capacity with the Department of Tourism, I felt that was a fair question.
Attorney Walker, do you think the reporter should have phrased her comments more like as a direct question rather than rumors? Say, for instance, should she have simply asked, are taxpayers funding Commissioner Farrington's travel with the governor? And, is she receiving taxpayer-funded security?
Definitely. And on this point, I'm going to have to completely disagree with Mr. Thomas. I think the only appropriate question is whether the governor's divorce was final. And the reason that that's the only appropriate question is because it answers the question as to whether there's a first lady. When he began as governor, there was a first lady. And I think it's a general appropriate curiosity of the public to know whether there is still a first lady. The first question, however, that the reporter asked was, is there an individual, and she identifies an individual who's acting or pretending to be the first lady? That was completely inappropriate. It was completely rude and disrespectful to the office of the governor. There are other means by which you can inquire or get details about the travel of a public official. You could just make a request for the travel records or the receipts or whichever official that you're looking into. But the way that she phrased that first question invited the response that she received. And I think that the only thing that the public really is entitled to know about the governor's personal life at this point is whether he's married or not. He answered the question, so let's move on.
Mr. James, I want to ask you, in circumstances like this, do you agree, when does it become the public's business?
This is a very delicate topic, but I'm glad that we're talking about it because, there's certain things that we're talking about. I just want everybody to keep a number of factual, right, details in context. Number one, we're a very small community. You can't ignore that. Everybody literally knows everybody. That's number one. Number two, the governor was on this particular, I think he did an interview and we spoke about it when I was a guest on this show sometime last year. I think he did an interview with Ernest with respect to his pending divorce and all that stuff. And the governor said, when the time is right, I will let the public know what's going on. But here's the point that I want to make. And it actually, is a personal one with me. During the election cycle this year, people would see me and say, Neville, why you ain't running for senator no more? And I said, because I want my life back. And people would stop and then they'd understand what I was talking about. The reality is, when you run for office, there's a large segment of the population who believe that because you're an elected official, they own you and they can ask you whatever they want because we, the one who elect you, and paying your salary. I understand both sides of the argument. I understand how the governor, got frustrated because, we got more important things to worry about than that. But Terry's right. The media has, a right to probe and ask questions. And, I don't like the rumor part. I'm not big on rumors to begin with, but I could understand both arguments.
And I know Neville was talking about the governor's interview with Ernest from the Virgin Islands Consortium. And, given the reporter's history of kind of asking similar questions, last month there was an article about the couple in the skybox at the Jets game. Do you think the governor should have been prepared or more prepared to respond to this line of questioning?
I think the governor knows that he's going to come under some degree of questioning / scrutiny. I think given the nature of the environment that he now operates in as a public official, he should expect those questions. He is entitled to a certain amount of privacy in his personal life, but it's the environment in which we live now. I remember as a kid growing up, used to see Governor Cyril Lee King down Main Street just hanging out. It didn't faze anyone, right? But if we had social media back in the 70s, I'm quite sure it'd be a different story. So it's the environment in which we operate that puts additional pressures on people holding elected office.
Yes. And that's all the show we're going to have for you today. For your news updates, tune in to WTJX Newsfeed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Marcelina Ventura Douglas. From all of us here at WTJX Channel 12, take care.